Hello, welcome to HCM 380. Why do we care if cost curves are shifting? Today we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're near a whiteboard because we need to really graph some things today. And this is one of the real challenges of taking an online class in economics, is that you don't really get a lot of formal instruction on the graphing. So we're going to try to do that today in a micro lesson, which is the ultimate challenge for all of us. So bear with me, and special thanks to my daughter for lending us her whiteboard this morning. So, I'm going to highlight two chapters. It's really going to help you jumpstart your own reading and study. It's chapter 7, which deals mostly with demand, and chapter 10, which deals with supply. For some reason, your author takes a 2-chapter vacation there between explaining demand curves and supply curves, I guess to help you let it sink in. But today we're going to do those two because that's how economics is usually started. Now, economists love this saying at the bottom of the board, all things being equal. We're taught in so many other places in life not to assume anything. I want you to just kind of get on board with me. We are going to assume that everything else is equal when we do the following examples. And today's examples are going to come from chapter 7, page 114, 116, chapter 10, page 156, 161, and 163. The nice thing is everything that I'm going to talk about today is in the book. This is just my attempt to help you get a better understanding. So let's go right to graphing. The first thing most economists are going to do, if you were to go talk to someone, or if you would come meet with me in my office, is draw a graph, okay? And we always start with pretty much the same graph. Very simple. Don't stress about the graph design or anything. But we've got an X and a Y axis here. And on the Y axis, we're going to have price every time, almost. That's how I say almost. And quantity. For the purposes of this class, you can do price, quantity. You can put a P. Sometimes I just put P or a Q, okay? And there's our axis. So, and very simply, we'll start with a demand curve for aspirin. This is kind of exhibit 7.1 in your book, I believe. Let's say, and we usually call that D1. Now, it's a curve, so it has an arrow. And actually, the arrow goes in both directions. It doesn't really matter. So what that tells us, very simply, let's assume right now that this point right here is 1 million, okay? That's a quantity of 1 million. And the price at one is $3 right here, okay, for a pack of aspirin. Let's just call it a bottle of aspirin. This is very simple. Now, let's say, for example, they change that price to $7. What do you think is going to happen? Fewer people, all things being equal, are going to demand aspirin at that price, okay? So people are going to move along this line, and at that point, maybe we have 500,000 people who demand aspirin. Okay, we're just learning right now, so the actual math, can stay simple. So, and I can do that. This is a continuous line. So obviously, if it was 1.5, it might be 1.5 million that might demand it if the price went down to 250. Okay, so we can draw a little dotted line out there if that helps you. Okay, you just learned what a demand curve is. It's a very simple demand curve. Now, it's important we said everything was equal, and so that curve is going to remain constant. That curve is going to remain linear, and sometimes it's a curve. If you look at 7, I believe it's 7.2, they do an example of a curve that might look more like this. That's fine, okay? I'm going to erase that for right now because we want to keep this simple. Now, let's think about something that might cause, the next thing is demand curve shifts, okay? And that's when the whole demand, drops. And what are some reasons demand curve might shift? One is consumer beliefs, okay? Consumer beliefs. Maybe all of a sudden there's a report that comes out from a celebrity that says, aspirin caused him to grow a purple toenail or something, okay? And everybody believes it. And everybody just drops back. So people stop using aspirin. Or let's, without being so silly, maybe it's a leading physician. Maybe the CDC says that they really don't recommend aspirin anymore. The entire curve would shift, okay? That's really nothing to do with price and quantity at that point. Now, and when that curve shifts, different things would happen. There might be another change. It's a change in wealth, okay? We know in healthcare that people that are wealthier consume more medicine. There's no doubt about it, okay? If it costs you, we talked a little bit about that in our discussion board, if it costs you a lot of money to go to the physician, you might not go for something simple, whereas another student in your class, may come from a wealthy family, and if they're going to go for the slightest little thing, maybe a runny nose. And the third thing is usually a change in substitutes. Okay, I know this is fast. That's the point. This is just a teaser. Substitutes are things you can use instead of that. So let's say this was aspirin, right? A substitute for aspirin might be Tylenol. So if something happens with Tylenol, the curve might shift in or out, or maybe Tylenol, can go in either direction. An example might be if which Tylenol is different than aspirin. It's ibuprofen, right? Let's say that it comes out that Tylenol is safer, and that 5 out of 10 or 5 out of 6 doctors recommend Tylenol. Okay, if this were the curve for Tylenol, the demand for Tylenol would shift out, like the whole curve would go out. Okay. So I did that on purpose to confuse you a little bit, because it's very important to know at the top, what are we graphing? Are we graphing aspirin, or are we graphing Tylenol? If we were doing nursing homes, we could talk about a phenomena in discharge planning, and it would make a huge difference whether we were graphing hospitals or nursing homes, right? Because typically, once you're discharged, you might go to the nursing home. So if hospitals tended to do more, for example, if hospitals decided they were going to do more physical therapy while you were still in the hospital, that would hurt the nursing home, right? So that would drop the demand, and the whole curve would probably shift for nursing home physical therapy, if that makes sense. Okay, that's demand. I highly encourage you to read Chapter 7 in more detail. Now we're going to go quickly to Chapter 10. Okay? And we're going to talk about supply. Doesn't really matter. We're just learning concepts right now. Let's say demand 1, and I'm going to keep my prices $1, $2, $3, $4, $5. I think that's easier to follow. Okay, we can now draw the supply. The supply curve typically looks almost like an X like this, right? Because we know people are going to provide. Think about a company, okay? Think about when computers first came out. There were just a few companies, right? So you probably could graph the entire thing might be Microsoft or whoever was making computers back then. But once people realized people were going to pay for it, more and more people, more and more suppliers. So as the price went up, more people entered the market to satisfy demand. Okay, so 9 times out of 10, our supply curve is going to go from the bottom left to the top right in some way, shape, or fashion. Our demand curve is going to go from the top left to the bottom right. Why is that? Because fewer people demand things when they're expensive, more people demand them when they're cheaper, all things being equal. And similarly, fewer people are supplying when the price is low. When the price gets higher, more people enter the market, okay? So this is a supply curve. And right away you see, I can, without even thinking, I can draw a line right here to this X. And this is the equilibrium price, okay? This is a concept you're going to learn in Chapter 10. Equilibrium price, okay? That is the point at which this is the most efficient market, okay? So at $3 and 1 million, everything is perfect. No one else is entering the market at that point. No one else is really demanding. And so what happens, what would happen if the supply fell back? Like let's say we were talking about, let's go back to nursing homes for a minute. And let's say a whole chain of nursing homes went out of business, okay? And so in that case, the supply curve, the whole curve is going to shift back, okay? And at that point, our equilibrium price actually went up, right? Kind of makes sense. There's fewer people providing a service, so the price got higher. But what happened to all these people over here? I mean, we went from 1 million maybe down to like 750,000 or something. We lost some people in there. This is unmet need, and that's not good, from a healthcare perspective. But that equilibrium price will actually move if a curve shifts, either curve, okay? Another example, we hear this every day, a hospital closed in a community, okay? So reasons for supply curves to shift, provider closure, pharmaceuticals might have a manufacturer, stops producing for whatever reason. Could be a factory, could be a company, etc. So those are reasons supply curves would constrict. And similarly, a supply curve might increase, might go the other way if all of a sudden a new provider comes out. Maybe a new market entrant would make it go the other way. Okay, you just learned economics in basically 5 minutes or less. So I highly encourage you to look at those two chapters, 7 and 10. They're going to build for the rest of the class. That on the test, they'll probably ask you, I will ask you, what happens if things shift one way or the other? It's a little more complicated than this, but not that much more complicated. So just take what we just talked about. Now read the chapters in detail, and then think to yourself and think about your own life. What would happen if you're in a small town, the hospital closes, right? That demand doesn't completely go away, but it's going to shift to other areas, or people are going to look for substitutes. So these are all key concepts, and I hope this helps you jumpstart your studying for the next phase. Thank you.